Everyone, welcome to the regular June 13th meeting of the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, Sacramento Area Sewer District, and the Sacramento County Sanitation District Financing Authority. If we could please have a roll call.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Bruin.
Present.
Carr. Here. Frost. Guerra. Harris. Here. Hume.
Here.
McGarvey.
Here.
Lee. Morin.
Here.
Natoli. Peters.
Here.
Orozco. Cerna. Villegas. Here. Warren. Kennedy. You have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. And since he's already standing, would you please join Director Harris in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, very good. That brings us on to our district separate
Excuse me,
matters.
Chair?
Yes.
I need to read the statement.
Oh, the Venture Cable statement? Sure, thank you.
This meeting of the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation and Sacramento Area Sewer District is being broadcast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned for our hearing impaired viewers and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will replay at 6 p.m. on Sunday, June 17th and Thursday, June 21st on Channel 14. In accordance with the Government Code 54952.3, compensation for meeting of these legislative bodies is required to be verbally disclosed. The amount of $100 will be paid for each member participating today as a member of the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, and the amount of $100 will be paid for each board member participating today as a member of the Sacramento Area Sewer District. Compensation for the Sacramento County Supervisors and City of Sacramento Council members is paid to the county and city respectively to partially offset the costs of those governments. Compensation for other board members is delivered to the individuals. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker identification form located at the back of chambers and hand it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Please silence your electronic devices at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, and for the record, we'll note the arrival of Director Lee. All right, on to item number 1, please.
Item number 1, Sacramento County Sanitation District's Financing Authority and Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District separate matters. Receive the 2018 update of the long-term financial plan and approve the capital funding project for the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District for fiscal years 2018-19 through 2027-28.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Is it coming through?
Metro Cable. Microphone on.
Actually, that was my bad. Sorry.
Okay.
It's on now.
There we go.
There's an eject button.
That's the hole in the floor there.
No, I'm just short. My name is Joe Mastretti. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the districts. Can we get the presentation for item 1, please? This morning we're going to go over the long-term financial plan update for the Regional Sand District for 2018, and we want to take a look at some of the highlights of the plan and the critical issues, the capital funding projection over the next 10 years. We want to look at some of the forecast results and some of the assumptions that have changed a little bit. Then we'll look at the debt management plan, specifically the Echo Water Project financing plan and the early debt retirement plan. There's some action items coming up for the next fiscal year. So the highlights are that the district is in healthy and improving financial condition. A lot of this has to do with the 1.39 billion state loans that we got for Echo Water Project. They're now all locked in at 1.6 or 1.7%, which is very good because these rates are now higher than that and probably going to trend even higher as time goes by. So we're fortunate to have them locked in at that low rate. The rate increase needs seem to be a little bit reduced. We think we might be able to level off around $38 based on the assumptions that we have in the model. And the debt restructuring continues to reduce the cost, and some of our existing debt can be paid off early, and that'll be key to keeping our rates level for lower. The critical issues are pretty much the same ones that we deal with all the time. Echo Water Project, the capital costs are getting close to firming up now, around the 1.7 billion range, but we're still just getting started on the operating cost side, so it'll be a few years before all those costs are known. We have a regulatory requirement changes that could come along. Our next permit, I believe, is due in 2021. There could be some requirements in there that cost us more capital project money and also operating costs. We'll have to see how that happens when it comes down the line. Legal challenges come up from time to time. It's a ever-present hazard in our business. Settlements for legal challenges could cost us money. Investment market changes have impacts on our financial condition. Depending on which way the interest rates move, it could be positive and negative both ways, depending, because we have a lot of cash that's invested. We also have lots of swaps outstanding that can vary. Their value can vary based on interest rates. Water recycling is getting to be a bigger part of our business. That also has opportunities for grant programs and low-cost loan programs on the capital side. And at some point in the future, we may be able to earn some operating revenue as well. Natural disasters and emergencies are something that we plan for. We keep large reserves to mitigate the impacts that could occur there. And then our aging infrastructure is something that we continually deal with our asset management plans. It's key to keeping up with that so that we don't defer our maintenance over a long period of time. That can cause you to have some really high capital costs at a point in the future that would require debt. And we've been pretty disciplined, I think, in doing our projects as the need comes up, and I think this is key to a sustainable financial future. And taking a look at the capital funding projection, this is the capital plan over the next 10 years. It totals about $1.44 billion, which is actually a little bit less than what it looked like last year, partly because some more of the Echo Water project was completed. That total includes 64% of that is for the Echo Water project. We also have about $338 million for capital maintenance and rehabilitation of the existing assets, which averages about $34 million a year. The CFP also includes $177 million for recycling projects in the next 10-year time frame. These projects could be bigger than that, but they would go beyond the 10-year time frame. And the largest projects that we're looking at in the next 2 years, other than the Echo Water, would be the digester rehabilitations, emergency storage basin D liner replacement, and the gas systems modifications. The emergency storage basin project is bigger than that. That's just the amount that's coming up in the next 2 years. And looking at the forecast results, the way we run the model with varying assumptions. This year, one of the assumptions that we changed a little bit was the growth factor. In the past, we used a 0.5% growth rate, which seemed very conservative based on our historical trend over a long period of time. But in the last 5 or 6 years, we've averaged a little bit less than that. So we lowered the growth projection to 0.4%. And even with that, we're still in pretty good shape. We don't rely a lot on that growth for our fiscal health. So we're still in pretty good shape, even lowering that assumption. The debt coverage ratios remain above the minimums required by the bond covenants, and the cash reserves are maintained above $300 million, which is important to maintain our credit ratings and to cover all our designated reserves. And the plan also allows about $328 million of the older bond debt to be paid off early, and that's key to keeping our rates low in the future. One of the things we did a little differently this year was a sensitivity analysis. In the prior plans, we looked at what the impact of a higher growth rate, closer to our historical average, around 1%. That boat is kind of sailed by now, or we haven't gotten back to that. So now we're looking at what would be the impacts of a downturn instead. So if we had a downturn similar to what we experienced in 2009, 10, 11, what kind of impact would that have? And it doesn't have a huge impact because we don't rely on the growth that much. We have very healthy reserves, so we can get through a couple of years of really slow growth. Your board has already approved rate increases up to $39, so if we had to, we could implement a little bit more. And by doing that, we would be able to continue the early debt retirement plan and the capital program as planned. And both of those things are key to fiscal sustainability over the long term. And this chart shows the debt issuance plan for the Echo Water. It looks pretty similar to what it was last year. The only thing that has changed slightly is the number 1 site prep and the number 3 main electrical substation projects. Those loans are both closed now, and we're starting to make the annual payments on them. They closed out slightly less than their maximum loan amount, which we would expect most of them to close out slightly less. So the total annual loan payment should be a little bit less than that estimate right there, but that's the best estimate we have for right now. And the early debt retirement plan looks a little bit different than it did last year, because now we're going to focus a little bit more on retiring principal as opposed to looking at the variable rate debt. And by doing so, I think we're able to shave off about another $20 million a year in debt service going forward. It's going to take us a little bit longer, and there's a few more transactions. We figured out a way that we can actually break apart some of these older debt issues and take them out a little at a time, because it takes us quite a while to accumulate cash on a monthly basis. It doesn't just appear in large chunks. So that's kind of where we are right now. Conditions will change over time, so this is not a etched in stone plan. The first item has already occurred. The $50 million transaction to retire the Series 2013A occurred on May 2016. And then the next item on your agenda would be the next item, the 2006 Series, 21.1 million principal that's ready to retire right now. And then if we did do those retirements, our debt service profile, these charts show that what the debt service would look like each year. And as you can see on the right side, the chart shows some peaks and valleys. And you can see they're way out around 2034. There's a big peak that would drive the annual debt service up to over $145 million for those 5 years. But I think a debt restructuring at that time, or right before that, would be able to move a lot of that principal retirement that occurs in the red portion. That's the bond debt. As you can see, that's where the variability is. And if we could level that out, we could probably level it out around $100 million a year, which is pretty great, because if we hadn't done anything, if we hadn't had to do the Echo Water project, our debt service would be right around $88-89 million a year. So with all the debt restructuring that we have done and what we plan to do, we'll end up with a annual debt service around $102 million a year, which is pretty good considering that we just added on about $1.3 billion worth of debt. And our overall cost of debt will be much lower than it was in the past. So I think things are looking up in our debt management area pretty well. So some of the action items that we're looking at in the very near future, paying off the 2006 bonds, and then possibly late in the next fiscal year, we could defease the 2011 bonds. This is a transaction that we might hold off on a little bit more, because the closer we get to that 2021 call date, the less the defeasance would cost us. And then late in the fiscal year, we have one of the direct purchase agreements with one of the banks for the variable rate debt is maturing, so we would have to renew that. So we would want to find out if the bank is going to be able to renew that with reasonable terms before we do the defeasance. So the only thing that's a certainty there would be the first item. So we recommend to receive and file the long-term plan and approve the capital funding projections. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. We will note the arrival of Director Guerra during that presentation. I have a few people requesting to speak, starting with Director Peters.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the reserves and the rate increases. It's not clear to me from your presentation. Are these early debt payoffs being paid for by the rate increases that were put in place for the Echo Water project? Or is it, which to me is just like a bonus, and from the standpoint of we're spending money that we increased rates for on something that we didn't tell people about?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we did tell people that we needed those rate increases to pay for the Echo Water project, which we do. But one of the advantages of the SRF loans is we don't have to start making payments on the loans until the projects are done. So that allows us to accumulate some cash. And part of the strategy was that you would implement those rates earlier so that you could gradually implement them. If you waited until they were absolutely necessary, it would be a big spike all at once. And then you wouldn't have accumulated any cash.
I understand that, but was it in our plan for the Echo Water increases to pay off debt that was in place that didn't have anything to do with Echo Water? I mean, if you're talking about, was it 2006 bonds? No, 2015, 16, and 18, 19. Would those have been paid off if we had not increased the rates? And are those bonds related to Echo Water?
The ones that we paid off are not directly related to Echo Water because they're older. They were issued for the interceptor systems mainly.
I'll try to see if I can answer. So when we started the Echo Water project, we were not certain that we would be getting a SRF loan, the low interest loan.
Right.
So we actually went to the bond market in 2014 and borrowed $150 million. So to fund the Echo Water project, we were planning to borrow in tranches to up to $1.5 billion or so. Mm-hmm. So to prepare for borrowing, you had to raise the rates ahead of time so that you have the means to pay, because when you borrow in the market, the payments come due within just a few months after the money is borrowed, whether we use it all or not. That's the reason why we're borrowing. So that's how the rate plan is put in place, assuming that we would be going into the market and borrowing. Now, the end rate by 2021 or 2022, where the operating costs are included and all the capital costs are included, the debt service has been included, we were projecting in the mid-60s at the time because of the costs and whatnot, the project costs and the operating expenses. Now because we started the proactive raising of the rates and we're accumulating cash, and then the SRF loan came along, which does not have the payments until 2021 or 22, it allowed us to accumulate cash early ahead of time, wherein we could take that cash and essentially swap with the state low interest loan to essentially paying out the high interest. So originally it wasn't planned that way, But it worked out in that fashion when we were successful in getting the SRF loan, the largest in the nation. That's what helped us in this. So with respect to the ratepayers, ultimately the actions that you've taken and early to help them get the lower rates in the end, because we were able to swap these high interest for the low interest loans. So that's what happened.
Well, I'm not sure I'm with you on that. It seems like we borrowed money from one purpose and we're excuse me, we're spending it on something else, which does, if you put all the money in a big bag, it all washes. But I wonder, I'm uncomfortable with that. Is it maybe it's Prop 218 kind of thing, where we tell people what we're going to borrow the money for? I mean, if we're paying debt off early, yes, that does help ratepayers, but I'm going to have to think about that.
Yeah. So to say, let's say if we did not pay off at all these early things, what would it mean is we would have had to borrow slightly less on the low SRF loans, which are cheaper loans. Instead, we would be carrying the higher interest bond debt, which means our total cost of debt service would be much higher than it would be. So, I mean, I'm not going to opine on the Prop 218 issue, but in the end, we need these rate increases to pay for the debt services that the Echo Water project would present us, plus to pay for the operating expenses and to maintain the debt service coverage that's needed to be maintained. For those are three things you have to do that. The question is, how did we ramp up and how did we end up there, which is what Joe was talking about. If you waited long enough, it would be much higher rate increases and very spiky. That's what it would have been. So that's what the picture would have looked like if we waited long enough. So anyway, I'm not going to opine on the Prop 218. I'm going to ask for counsel if she's got any opinion on that.
Not having the notice right in front of me about what the rate increases say, I don't see there's a problem, because basically, like Prabhakar said, we would have had to raise the rates even higher than what we're doing in order to pay for the higher debt service. So I think that the 218 issue is you're raising the rates to cover expenses, and in this case, you're actually not having to raise them as much. So I don't see a problem with it at all.
Okay. I'm still not
Well, a little
in on
additional,
that,
a little additional perspective. If you look at our debt policy, we aim to finance only 75% of new projects, whereas in the Echo Water project, the SRF loans actually cover more than that, and the reason was because it's very low cost money. So it would be prudent for us to take off some of the higher cost debt and take on more of the SRF loan, which is what we did.
Yeah.
And so then by Prabhakar's example is we're actually combining all of our debt into one.
Well, is that debt payoff program something that was presented to this board at the time the rate increases were approved?
Yes, and it's been in the long-term financial plan for 5 years, and there's always been a early debt retirement component of it. It's just getting a little bit more refined now.
I also have a question about rate increases already approved, whether we should leave that on the books or not. I think that, to me, that just makes it an easy way to reach into that pot of money when the project may have already been completed.
That's definitely is up for discussion. So your board has approved rate increases to reach up to $39 by 2021. July 1st, the rate would be $37. The financial plan that you have in front of you contemplates going up to $38 and stays $38 for the rest of the planning period, essentially flat for the remainder, assuming there's no surprises from the regulatory sides and whatnot. So we could do a couple of things, which we will come back next March, is we can postpone going from 37 to 38 for the next year for essentially a couple of years, and then pick it back up. That's an option that your board will have. Or implemented 38 on July 1st, 2019, and essentially just said, that's it, no more. So you can forego the dollar that you already approved at that point. So all of those options that you have on the table, and we will come to you next March with those discussions.
So keeping that rate increase in place is not what we will be voting on today?
No, you're not.
Okay, and then on the reserves, which you said was 300 million, I think? Is that what you said, Joe?
That's our minimum target.
Okay, do we have an established percentage, or do we have a ceiling on the amount of reserves?
We
this
do not have a
organization?
ceiling today. So we're accumulating more reserves because we're getting reimbursements from the loans, and so that's actually is what we're going to be using to pay down some of the things that are. But if you look at the 10-year financial plan, there's a reserve projections, the cash projections, what we will have. So our target, long-term target is roughly to maintain around 300 million, as Joe was mentioning, the purpose of which is we are very highly leveraged utility. We have $1.25 billion on the older debt, and we're layering on another $1.35 billion, so bringing it to close to $2.6 billion. If you look at our debt-to-asset ratio, we're fairly highly leveraged. And that weighs on us negatively in the bond rating sector. To counter that, we want to maintain a fairly healthy reserve so that we continue to receive a better bond rating. So we don't have a ceiling. We anticipate going to around 450 million-ish, somewhere in the neighborhood, but we'll draw down as some of these, the pay downs are happening.
What's the logic behind a $450 million ceiling?
It's not a number that we set as a target, but it's more of the cash management. As our expenditures are happening from the Echo Water project, you just have to, there are certain times that you draw down, and then we submit to the state. The thing that we have to also keep in mind is so far we have gotten about 450 to close to $475 million in reimbursements from the state. State does not have a habit of maintaining a very strong financial position for long periods of times. So we're at the mercy of their thing. So if there's a hiccup in the sense where the state is not able to reimburse us quickly, then we got to have this balance to pay back. Because remember, if that doesn't happen, we got to hurry up and go to the bond market and get a separate loan. Go to the bonds and borrow that. So this higher cash reserves gives us the cushion that's needed, while also maintaining the floor amount, roughly around 300 million, because we need that for the rating purposes if we have to ever go to the market. So there's a bit of a complexity in there.
Oh, I understand that, but it sounds to me like we're borrowing money to put in a savings account. And so we're paying interest on money that we're putting in this reserve/savings account. And I don't agree with that policy.
Yeah, so the one point on that is, it's fortunately, the money that we're borrowing from the SRF loan is, like Joe said, 1.6, 1.7%. Now, if 2 years ago, we had a definitely, number one, negative arbitrage. The first thing is we won't be paying back on the debt service on that low debt until the projects are complete. So as a big chunk of the project is complete, a year later, the debt service payments start. So our earnings now are hitting close to 1.5 to 1.6% on the cash side. So whatever that's a pool. So we're roughly a wash. So we're not actually losing money. That would not be the case a couple of years ago. And my hope is, as interest rates go up a little bit, we may be right at that point. But the bottom line that we got to do is maintain that financial flexibility in the face of these uncertainties as we implement this project.
Yeah, the whole question, though, of increasing rates for the ratepayers so that we can have money in our reserves, that we use their money and borrow money, I find questionable.
It can look that way, but again, I think
it does look that way.
No, what I'm saying is it can look that way on a surface, but as I explained, we needed these healthy reserves to essentially face the uncertainties, because once you approve the project and the construction, you have the regulatory deadlines that we have to meet by. So that part is fixed. The expenditures from that side is fixed. On the revenue side is where we have a little bit more flexibility, and we need to maintain that flexibility to essentially counter any uncertainties that we may encounter during this 5-6 year period.
Okay, I just want to say on the keeping the rate increase in place, I would expect that to be a separate board item for discussion next spring, whenever it comes
We
up.
will bring it to you.
Not part of the budget.
Yes, this is not a budget. This is just a long-term financial plan. You're not even approving the long-term financial plan. The only thing you're approving today is the capital projections. Again, all of those projects, they will come back to your approval when you're actually implementing them. It's simply said, this is the projection we're looking at. That's all you're approving today.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Director Harris.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I appreciate the questions that Director Peters brought up, but I'd like to say that ultimately the beneficiary of all of your financial planning is the ratepayer. And you know, when I look at the financial stature of Regional SAN, I have to tell you that for the last 3 years I've been very impressed with your money management. It's basically always a good idea to pay down high interest debt. And the way that you've accomplished, again, I think that the ratepayer is the beneficiary. So I would be happy to move the staff recommendation on this item.
Okay, very good, thank you. Director Carr.
Yes, thank you. A couple of short questions, Joe. Exactly what is our debt coverage ratio?
If you look at the long-term financial plan,
So on page 17.
the table on page 17,
We are going from about 2x, going all the way down to 1.4 at the end of the planning period. Our requirement on the senior debt is 1.2 is a minimum, and a 1.1 on a subordinate. But our target is to maintain a 1.3 and above for the senior, and 1.2 and above for the subordinate debt. That's our target. So in this planning horizon, today, because of the cash that we have, or because the rate increases are bringing the revenue, our debt coverage ratios are fairly healthy. But as we stop raising rates, because it's frozen, the debt coverage ratios will gradually reduce and down to, if you see, it's down to about 1.4, 1.5. It's on the page at the bottom.
and the extra 0.4 or 0.3 over the debt is what we use for our capital program. So that's very important to have, enough of a cushion there so that you can continue your capital program.
So the rating agencies are satisfied with 1.3?
The bond covenant set it at 1.2. It's a legal obligation that we have to meet. And the rating agencies would like to see it higher than that. If you were hovering right at 1.2 all the time, you'd probably get a rating downgrade.
Yeah, I was thinking they'd like to see 1.5. So what's our credit rating, bond rating?
We're AA rated and stable outlooks on both districts.
And have you ever looked, Joe, as to what it would cost to improve that, whether or not it was worth it, that investment to raise to 1.5? The increase in
It would take some pretty big rate increases to increase the debt ratio. And that's not the only thing that the rating agencies look at. We've never had more than a one-notch up or down rating. So it's very difficult to move. And in our case, to get to a AAA rating, we would have to have a lot less debt. They're happy to give us a AA rating because we have lots of reserves.
Okay, thank you.
And I will tell you, in 2009, 2010, we actually we went below 1.2, and we had a reserve that we had to pull the money out to actually get to 1.2. There's a reserve specifically dedicated to that. And we wouldn't want to be in that position where we get downgraded and whatnot.
Yeah.
At that time, we were on a negative watch for a downgrade, but they were able to look past that because we had a good long-term plan where we had a plan for getting back to a more prudent reserve and a more stable debt coverage ratio. So they didn't actually downgrade us at that time.
Yeah, it's hard to move it when you have a single source of revenue. That's the big thing for most of those agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Mistretti?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I just want to say, I too want to praise the money management of this organization. I think paying down high-interest debt it's hard to even fathom how incredibly cheap the money from the state is at 1.5, 1.6% interest. And I appreciate Director Peters' points about transparency and about the sort of borrowing money in order to put it away. But if the end result, as Director Harris mentioned, is a lower rate for the ratepayers, to me that makes a lot of sense. It's, if you go to buy a car and you have the cash in your pocket, but they offer you 0% loan, you buy the car on their money and use your money to earn a little interest. And so, I think all in all, that's a good financial plan, financial outlook, but I too would like to see the codification of that lower rate come back to the board.
We'll come back in March, and I'll just make a quick couple of points. We're incredibly fortunate to have received the low-interest loan, which that money doesn't exist today. And they actually take pride in telling us that we took all the money. So when I see people, they look at me in a dirty way and say, you took all our money, you don't have anything. The second thing is, if you remember, Director...
Offer him a glass of water to drink, just don't tell him where it came from.
Hume, is that you were asking when we came for the budget approvals for this year, you were asking whether we have the Echo Water project operating costs are included in the projections or not. The same page that I mentioned, page 17, you see a line item, special line item, that's exclusively dedicated to the operating costs of the Echo Water project. It ramps up, and we're projecting, and that's included as part of our projections. Great. So you had that question last time, and I said,
correct.
A couple of months later, we would bring this in, and I'll point that to you, and I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that.
Appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Any further discussion? I have a motion by Director Harris, a second by Director Guerra. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. On to item 2, please.
Item number 2, Sacramento County Sanitation District's Financing Authority and Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District separate matters. Authorize early redemption of the Series 2006 bonds.
Good morning again.
Welcome back.
This is the item that was mentioned in the long-term financial plan, the first item for the 18-19 fiscal year. This particular payoff has been in the plan for a couple of years. We've been holding off on it a little bit to wait for some cash to accumulate, and also to make sure this is the right time to do this transaction. And it seems to be the right time now. It has a net present value of approximately $1.9 million worth of savings. It's about $2.4 million of cash flow savings. So even discounting it at 3%, it's still a very positive transaction. It'll save us about $1 million a year for the next 18 years in debt service payments. So it's a really good time to do this transaction. Also, it doesn't take a whole lot of cash that we don't have already restricted. There's about $11 million reserve fund that was required by the 2006 bonds. It was left outstanding when we refunded those bonds in 2014 because of the investments that were related to that reserve, and because at that time we would have had to escrow them for 2 years to wait for the call date. Well, that call date is passed now, so we don't have to escrow them, and so it's a really positive transaction at this time.
Move the item.
Okay. Motion by Director Peters. Any discussion or questions? Second by Director Harris. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. On to item 3, acting as the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District.
Item number 3, contract number 8000116, approve the selection of an agreement with Carollo Engineers, Inc. to provide engineering services for the Emergency Storage Basin D Rehabilitation Project.
All right, this is a consent item. Any questions?
Move the item. Second.
Motion from Director Moran, second from Director Bruins. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Is there anybody in the public wishing to comment on an item not on the agenda? Seeing no one come forward, we move on to item 5, acting as the Regional County Sanitation District and the Sacramento Area Sewer District. Any?
Oh, just a couple of quick notes. We won't have, because of summer recess, we won't have meetings until July 25th. That's our next meeting. The next thing I wanted to let you know that in the water storage investment program, the Prop 1 bond fund, our project, the South County Ag project, is ranked number 3 at this point. Very good shot of getting up to $280 million in grants. We will know within the next 4 weeks or so, possibly while you are in a break, and we'll let you know as soon as we have the information.
Great.
That's all I have.
Thank you. That concludes items for the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District. Moving on to the Sacramento Area Sewer District. Item number 6, please.
Contract number 6002, award of contract for the mainline lining for root mitigation project.
And item number 7.
Contract number 8000084, approve the First Amendment to the funding agreement for the Arcade Creek Recreation and Park District Joe Smith Nature Trail Pedestrian Bridge Construction Project.
Okay, these are consent items. Any questions for staff? No? Sir. A motion from Director McGarvey.
Second.
Second from Director Bruins. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Items carry unanimously.
Item number 8, Sacramento Area Sewer District, District Separate Matters, resolution of intention to lien delinquent sewer service charges, set public hearing for July 25th, 2018.
Good morning. My name is Joe Mastretti. Now I am the Chief Financial Officer of SASD. And you have before you the resolutions that we do every year related to the delinquent accounts. A letter was sent out on April 28th to notify all the delinquent accounts of this process, and they'll have a couple of months yet to get their accounts current. Usually through this process, we note, roughly 3,000 to 4,000 accounts net will become current and won't end up on the roll. So based on that, we recommend that you approve the resolutions and set the public hearing for the next board meeting on July 25th.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Mastretti, starting with Director Peters?
Thank you. It's amazing how close the numbers remain year after year. Do you have any theories as to why that, given the economy's changed? And no theories? Okay.
There's roughly 4 to 5% of the accounts will be delinquent at all times.
What percentage of these do you actually collect?
Of the ones that go on the roll?
What accounts, that go on the roll?
All of them.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Sometimes people just wait for them to get on the tax roll. That's when they pay.
There are a few that would do that intentionally. A small business would see that as maybe a short-term loan that they don't even have to apply for. I mean, they pay a pretty
10% penalty.
Pretty high penalty, but if you're a seasonal business in particular, it might be the best way to do it. I think that would be a pretty small percentage, though.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Mastretti? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move the item.
Moved by Director Bruins. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Frost. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. Thank you.